The air exploded with a deafening roar as thousands of bees poured out of their hives all at once. No, 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 Noah Carter shouted, dropping his smoker and sprinting across the valley. The swarm twisted into the sky like a living tornado, growing larger with every passing second. Volunteers scattered in every direction, trying to stay calm while protecting the hives. "They're leaving," one of them yelled. Daniel Carter ran toward his son. "Noah, what's happening?" "I don't know," Noah answered, shielding his face as another swarm burst from a nearby hive. "They've never behaved like this." Walter Brooks stumbled over the rocky ground, breathing hard. "Look at them," he cried. "Every colony is taking off." Rachel Morgan raised her camera with trembling hands. "If they don't come back." Noah didn't let her finish. "They have to." He climbed onto the bed of his father's old pickup truck, searching the sky with desperate eyes. Thousands upon thousands of bees circled above the valley they had spent the last 8 months bringing back to life. If they abandoned it now, everything would be over. Daniel grabbed Noah's arm. "Talk to me." Noah swallowed hard. "They only do this when something is terribly wrong." The buzzing grew louder. Then, as suddenly as they had risen, the swarms surged toward the western ridge. Noah's heart dropped. "Follow them," he shouted. Everyone jumped into their trucks. Dust filled the air as they raced after the disappearing cloud of bees. Noah gripped the dashboard so tightly his knuckles turned white. "This can't be happening." Daniel glanced at his son. "You've done everything right. What if I missed something?" "You didn't." "What if Grandpa was wrong?" Daniel looked at him sharply. "Don't say that." "But what if?" He wasn't. The truck bounced over another rut. Neither of them spoke again. Because deep inside, both feared the same thing. 8 months earlier, in the spring of 2014, deep in California's Central Valley, the valley had been so quiet that Noah could hear the wind scraping across the cracked earth. Nothing moved. No birds. No butterflies. No insects. Only silence. Then the old pickup rolled to a stop. Before the engine even died, Noah jumped out and yanked the tarp off the back. Wooden beehives filled the truck bed. Daniel climbed down more slowly. "You could at least wait until I turn the engine off. We're losing daylight. We've got weeks." "No." Noah lifted the first hive onto his shoulder. "We're already late." He carried it 50 yards into the valley before carefully placing it beneath the skeleton of a long-dead oak tree. A voice echoed across the road. "What in heaven's name is that boy doing?" Walter Brooks stepped out of his truck, shading his eyes. Another farmer parked behind him. Then another. Within minutes, nearly 15 people stood watching. Walter shook his head. "Noah." Noah looked up. "Morning, Walter. What are you carrying?" "Bees." "I can see that." Walter walked closer. "What I can't see is why." Noah smiled. "I'm bringing the valley back." The farmers stared at him. Then laughter erupted. One man slapped another on the shoulder. "I told you grief makes people do strange things." A woman whispered. "Samuel's grandson has inherited his impossible ideas." Daniel watched silently. He wanted to defend his son. Instead, he picked up another hive and carried it into the valley. Walter followed him. "Daniel." "What?" "Talk some sense into him." Daniel kept walking. "I tried. And he talked sense into me." Walter stopped. "What?" Daniel gently lowered the hive beside Noah's. When Samuel was dying, he asked Noah to promise he'd never give up on this valley. Walter sighed. "A dying man's wish. A grandfather's dream. They're not always the same." Daniel looked around at the cracked earth. They were to Samuel. By sunset, father and son had placed over 200 hives. Daniel collapsed onto the tailgate, exhausted. "I forgot how heavy these things are." Noah handed him a bottle of water. "We've only started." Daniel laughed. "You're trying to kill your old man. I'm trying to save a valley." Walter walked over carrying 2 sandwiches. "I figured neither of you remembered to eat." Daniel smiled. "You know us too well." Walter handed 1 sandwich to Noah. "You really believe this can work?" Noah nodded. "I do." Walter sat beside him. "I've farmed here for 40 years. Grandpa told me. I watched this valley feed hundreds of families. I've seen the photographs. Then I watched the drought destroy it." Noah nodded. "And that's exactly why I'm here. I buried my wife before I buried my farm." Noah slowly looked at him. Walter's eyes filled with tears. "When the crops failed, she blamed herself because she'd convinced me to borrow money for irrigation. I'm sorry. So am I." Walter looked across the valley. "When she died, I stopped believing this place deserved another chance. Noah was quiet for several seconds. My grandfather never stopped believing. Walter smiled sadly. No. He said the valley wasn't dead. He said it was sleeping. Walter chuckled through his tears. That's exactly what he used to tell me. So maybe. Noah stood and looked across the barren land. It's time to wake it up. Walter didn't answer. But for the first time, he didn't laugh. That night, Noah couldn't sleep. He sat alone at the kitchen table, surrounded by his grandfather's journals. Daniel walked in carrying 2 mugs. He stopped, smiled, poured 1 mug into the sink. Then fill it with hot chocolate instead. I keep forgetting you're still 17. Noah laughed softly. You've been saying that since I was 15. Daniel placed the mug beside him. You've been acting 30 since then. Noah opened another journal. Every page contained years of handwritten notes. Flower species, rainfall, bee behavior, pollination routes, sketches of the valley before it died. Suddenly a folded letter slipped from between the pages. Noah frowned. I've never seen this. Daniel looked up. What is it? The envelope had only 2 words written across the front. For Noah. His hands trembled as he opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. If you're reading this, then I'm gone. And you've probably decided to do something everyone else says is impossible. Noah smiled despite the lump in his throat. Daniel quietly pulled out a chair. They read together. People will laugh before they understand. Some will call you foolish. Others will tell you to quit. Don't be angry with them. Most people fear what they've never seen. Daniel wiped his eyes. Samuel's words continued. Remember this, Noah. You're never fighting the land. You're fighting hopelessness. If you can make people believe again, the valley will follow. Neither of them noticed headlights slowing outside the house. A black SUV stopped across the road. Inside, a sharply dressed man lowered a pair of binoculars. He watched Noah through the kitchen window before speaking to the man beside him. So that's the boy. Yes, Mr. Lang. Victor Lang smiled coldly. I thought he'd give up after Samuel died. It doesn't look like he plans to. Victor's smile disappeared. Then we'll make sure he does. He started the engine and drove away into the darkness, leaving Noah completely unaware that restoring the valley was no longer his greatest challenge. Someone had already decided to stop him before his dream could take root. The next morning, Noah was already in the valley before sunrise. The air was cool, and the only sound was the gentle hum of bees leaving their hives in search of nectar. He smiled. Go on, he whispered. Show them this valley still has a heartbeat. Daniel pulled up a few minutes later with breakfast balanced in one hand and a toolbox in the other. You skipped dinner last night. I wasn't hungry. You skipped breakfast too. I know. Daniel handed him a sandwich. Your grandfather used to say a hungry beekeeper makes expensive mistakes. Noah laughed. I miss that man. So do I. Before either of them could say another word, the rumble of engines echoed across the valley. 3 pickup trucks rolled to a stop. Walter stepped out first. Behind him came 6 younger farmers carrying wooden posts. One of them grinned. We brought you a gift. Daniel frowned. I'm not sure I like the sound of that. The men walked to the entrance of the valley and drove a large sign into the ground. They stepped back, laughing. The sign read, Welcome to Noah's Bee Hotel, where even the bees will check out. The group burst into laughter. One teenager held up his phone. Come on, bee boy. Smile for the internet. Another shouted. Maybe those bees can pollinate rocks. More laughter. Daniel took 1 step forward. That's enough. One of the farmers shrugged. We're just having fun. No, Daniel replied. You're trying to humiliate my son. Walter didn't laugh. He looked from the sign to Noah. Aren't you going to say something? Everyone turned toward the 17-year-old. Noah walked to the sign. For a moment, it looked as though he might tear it down. Instead, he straightened it because it leaned slightly to one side. The crowd looked confused. There, Noah said. Now everyone can read it. A farmer frowned. You aren't angry? No. Why not? Because every person who comes here to laugh. He looked around the valley. We'll come back one day to see if I was right. The laughter stopped. For the first time, nobody had a clever response. Walter climbed back into his truck without saying a word. The others quietly followed. Daniel watched them disappear. I don't know where you learned patience. Noah smiled. Grandpa. 3 days later, Rachel Morgan returned. This time she carried more than a camera. She carried questions. I've been researching your grandfather. Daniel looked up. And he wasn't just respected. She opened a folder. He was one of the state's most successful beekeepers. Walter, who had quietly stopped by that morning, nodded. That's true. Rachel continued. He spent the last 7 years of his life studying why this valley collapsed. Noah looked surprised. 7 years? You didn't know? He shook his head. Rachel handed him several photocopied documents. I found these in the county archives. Noah's eyes widened. Maps, research notes, old aerial photographs, letters to universities asking for funding, applications that had all been rejected. One sentence stood out. Without pollinators, the valley will continue collapsing even if rain returns. Daniel stared at the page. He never told us. Walter sighed. He didn't want people thinking he'd failed. Rachel looked at Noah. I think he was simply ahead of his time. Noah carefully folded the papers. I'm finishing what he started. I know. And I'm not stopping. Rachel smiled. I know that too. That evening, Noah noticed a drone hovering over the valley. It circled the beehives before flying away. Daniel frowned. Is that yours? No. Walter watched it disappear. I don't like this. Neither did Noah. The following afternoon, Rachel's article went live. By sunset, it had been shared thousands of times. By morning, millions. News stations called. Podcasters wanted interviews. Environmental groups requested meetings. Daniel switched off the television after the 4th interview request. This is getting out of hand. Noah shrugged. I'm still just feeding bees. Apparently, the whole country wants to watch you do it. The attention changed everything. Cars lined the road leading into the valley. Some visitors came to support Noah. Others came hoping to witness him fail. One elderly woman stepped out of an old station wagon, carrying 6 beautifully crafted beehives. My husband built these before he passed away. She smiled warmly. He always said they'd find the right beekeeper. Noah swallowed hard. I can't take them. You can. They're worth a fortune. So was his dream. She pressed the hives into his hands. Now they're part of yours. The next day, a carpenter delivered 20 more. Then another truck arrived with lumber. A nursery donated thousands of native wildflower seedlings. 2 high school students volunteered. Then 10. Then 50. Within a month, every Saturday looked like a community festival. Teachers, mechanics, retired farmers, college students, entire families. Everyone wanted to help. Even Walter showed up carrying a trailer full of fence posts. Daniel folded his arms. I thought you said this wouldn't work. Walter scratched the back of his neck. I still don't know. Then why are you here? Walter looked toward Noah, who was teaching children how to safely approach a hive. Because that boy reminds me of someone. Samuel? Walter nodded. And because I don't want my grandchildren asking why I stood around doing nothing. Summer arrived. 1,000 hives now stretched across the valley. Tiny patches of wildflowers had begun appearing. For the first time in years, butterflies returned. Rachel, this is unbelievable, she whispered. Noah smiled. We're only getting started. Then everything changed. One afternoon, Noah opened a hive and froze. Captured everything. The bees inside barely moved. He inspected another hive. Then another. His breathing became shallow. Daniel hurried over. What is it? We lost the queen. Can you replace her? Yes. He opened another hive. His face turned pale. So did this one. Walter rushed over. What's wrong? Noah didn't answer. He moved from hive to hive, checking colony after colony. By sunset, they had found 12 queenless colonies. Rachel looked worried. Can disease do this? It can, Noah answered. So can parasites. Daniel placed a hand on his son's shoulder. We'll fix it. Noah shook his head. I'm not sure we can. That night he stayed in the valley alone, inspecting every hive by flashlight. He filled pages of his grandfather's journal with notes. Still, nothing made sense. Just before dawn, he heard tires crunching across gravel. A black SUV stopped near the entrance. Victor Lang stepped out wearing polished boots that had never touched farm soil. He smiled as though he owned the place. So, he looked around the valley. I hear you're becoming quite famous. Noah closed the journal. What do you want? Victor walked slowly past the hives. I came to make your father one final offer. Daniel had just arrived and overheard him. We already answered you. Victor smiled. I've increased it. Daniel folded his arms. How much? $5 million. Walter nearly dropped the bucket he was carrying. Rachel stopped recording. Victor spread his arms. Take the money. Move somewhere else. Let professionals develop this land. Daniel didn't even hesitate. No. Victor's smile faded. You didn't even think about it. I already did. Victor looked at Noah. Tell your father he's making a mistake. Noah met his eyes. The biggest mistake would be believing this valley belongs to you. Victor took one slow step closer. You've inspired a lot of people. I hope so. Victor's voice turned cold. It would be a shame if they watched you fail. He climbed back into the SUV and drove away. Walter stared after him. I don't trust that man. Neither did Noah. As the dust settled behind the departing vehicle, a strange sound rolled across the valley. It started with one hive, then another, then hundreds. Thousands of bees burst into the sky at the same time. Noah's smile disappeared. They're not foraging, he whispered. They're fleeing. The buzzing became deafening. Thousands of bees spiraled above the valley, merging into one enormous black cloud that blocked the morning sun. Volunteers abandoned their tools and stared upward. Children clung to their parents. Rachel forgot to press the record button. Walter's face turned white. I've kept bees for 40 years, he whispered. I've never seen anything like this. Noah grabbed his smoker and ran toward the nearest hive. Stay calm, he shouted. Nobody swatted them. Just stay calm. Daniel caught up with him. Can you stop them? I don't know. What do they see? I don't know. What do they smell? I don't know. Noah's voice cracked. For the first time since the project began, he looked afraid. The swarm suddenly surged toward the western ridge. Follow them, Noah yelled. Dozens of trucks raced after the bees. When they reached the ridge, Noah jumped out before the truck stopped. His boots landed in the middle of a field of wildflowers. Or what had been a field of wildflowers. Every blossom was brown. Every stem had collapsed. The sweet scent of flowers had been replaced by the sharp smell of chemicals. Walter knelt and rubbed the soil between his fingers. His expression hardened. Someone sprayed this. Rachel immediately began taking photographs. Daniel looked around. There are tire tracks. Fresh tread marks crossed the field. Noah followed them with his eyes. They came during the night. Walter slowly stood. They didn't come to destroy flowers. Noah looked at him. They came to drive away the bees. Rachel zoomed in on the tire tracks. If someone wanted to stop the restoration, they'd attack the pollinators first, Noah finished. The sheriff arrived an hour later. He studied the field before removing his hat. I'll investigate. Daniel frowned. That's all. We don't have enough evidence. Rachel pointed toward the tracks. We have those. They tell me a vehicle was here. And the chemicals? We'll test them. How long will that take? A few days. A few days? Walter snapped. The bees don't have a few days. The sheriff sighed. I understand. No, Walter replied quietly. You don't. That evening, the volunteers gathered around Noah. One teenager asked the question everyone was thinking. What do we do now? Silence. Every eye turned toward Noah. He looked across the damaged field, then toward the hives, then at his grandfather's journal. Finally, he spoke. When my grandfather got knocked down. Walter smiled. He planted again, he finished. Noah nodded. If they destroy one field. A little girl holding a packet of seeds interrupted him. We plant 2. Noah smiled. No. Everyone looked confused. We plant 5. For the first time that day, people laughed. Not because they doubted him, because hope had returned. That night, something incredible happened. Pickup trucks began arriving from every direction. Nobody had called them. Nobody had organized them. They simply came. Teachers, firefighters, construction workers, students, retired farmers, local business owners, church groups, scout troops. A restaurant owner brought hot meals. A nursery delivered thousands of native plants. A trucking company donated water tanks. Rachel looked around in disbelief. How did all these people know? A volunteer smiled. We saw your story. Another added. We couldn't sit at home. Walter quietly wiped away a tear. I've never seen this valley this full. Daniel looked at Noah. You did this. Noah shook his head. No. He looked around at the hundreds of strangers working under portable lights. They did. The work continued until sunrise. Every poisoned section had been replanted. Every damaged hive had been repaired. Every volunteer left believing they had become part of something bigger than themselves. Weeks turned into months. The valley slowly transformed. Wildflowers spread across hills that had been bare for years. Native grasses returned. Butterflies filled the fields. Then came the birds. Walter stood silently one morning. Listen. Everyone became quiet. Birdsong echoed across the valley. Daniel smiled. I almost forgot what that sounded like. The soil softened. Seasonal rains finally soaked into the recovering ground instead of washing away. A small stream that had been dry for nearly a decade began flowing again. Children gathered along its banks, laughing as they watched dragonflies skim across the water. Rachel lowered her camera. No one is going to believe this. Walter smiled. They will when they see it. Scientists arrived from several universities. They studied the soil, the plants, the insects, the bee colonies. One professor approached Noah. You're not just restoring a valley. What am I doing? You're proving what happens when people restore an ecosystem instead of fighting it. Noah smiled. My grandfather figured that out years ago. The sheriff returned one afternoon carrying a folder. We identified the chemical. Everyone gathered around. It was an herbicide. Daniel folded his arms. Did you find out who bought it? The sheriff nodded slowly. It was purchased through a company owned by Victor Lang. Silence swept across the valley. Rachel stared in disbelief. So it really was him. The sheriff sighed. We still can't prove he ordered anyone to spray the field. Walter shook his head. He knew exactly what he was doing. Rachel's investigation became national news. Once the evidence reached the media, Victor's development partners immediately pulled out of the project. Investors abandoned him almost overnight. Environmental agencies launched investigations into his company, and the luxury resort was canceled before construction could even begin. The man who believed money could buy anything had lost everything that mattered: his reputation, his investors, and the future he thought he controlled. A week later, a familiar black SUV rolled into the valley. Victor stepped out alone. He looked nothing like the confident businessman everyone remembered. He walked toward Noah. I came to apologize. Nobody spoke. Victor took a deep breath. I wanted this land. We know, Daniel replied. I convinced myself I was saving it. Walter scoffed. You wanted to cover it with concrete. Victor lowered his head. I was wrong. He turned toward Noah. I underestimated you. No, Noah answered calmly. You underestimated what people can do when they believe in something. Victor nodded. I suppose I did. He held out his hand. Noah shook it. Not because Victor deserved forgiveness, but because Noah refused to let bitterness become part of the valley's future. That autumn, Carter Valley held its very first honey and wildflower festival. More than 5,000 people attended. Children learned about bees. Local farmers sold produce grown in fields that had once been abandoned. Music echoed across the hills. Rachel stood on the stage. When I first came here, she smiled at Noah. I thought I was covering the story of one determined teenager. She looked across the crowd. I was wrong. People from across California, and eventually the country, came to witness what happened here, listened quietly. This became the story of an entire community that chose hope over hopelessness. Thunderous applause filled the valley. Walter stepped onto the stage next. I owe someone an apology. He turned toward Noah. I laughed at you. His voice trembled. I told you this valley was dead. He looked around at the flowers stretching to the horizon. I've never been happier to be wrong. The crowd rose to its feet. Daniel placed his hand on Noah's shoulder. Your grandfather would be proud of you. Noah smiled through tears. And Mom. Daniel looked toward the hills glowing beneath the evening sun. She's smiling too. Father and son embraced as applause echoed through the valley. Months later, the old mocking sign disappeared forever. In its place stood a handcrafted wooden sign. Welcome to Carter Valley, California, where bees returned, and people found hope again. Visitors stopped every day to read it. Schools brought students to learn about pollinators and habitat restoration. Other farming communities began planting native wildflower corridors instead of relying only on chemicals. The movement spread far beyond one valley. Late one evening, after the last visitor had gone home, Noah climbed the eastern ridge carrying his grandfather's weathered journal. Daniel followed a few moments later and sat beside him without saying a word. Together they looked down at the valley. Golden wildflowers stretched as far as the eye could see. Butterflies floated lazily through the evening air. The stream shimmered beneath the fading sunlight, and birds settled into the trees that had once stood silent for years. Then Noah looked up. Thousands of bees filled the evening sky. For just a heartbeat, his chest tightened. The memory of that terrifying morning flashed through his mind. The day every colony had burst into the air. The day he thought he had lost everything. Neither of them spoke. They simply watched. The great cloud of bees circled the valley once, then slowly began descending. One by one, group by group, each colony returned to its own hive. The buzzing softened until it became the peaceful hum Noah had dreamed of hearing again. He smiled. They came back. Daniel nodded, never taking his eyes off the valley. They were never running from home. Noah opened his grandfather's journal. The final page held only one sentence. The sweetest honey you'll ever harvest is the hope you leave behind. A tear rolled down Noah's cheek as he gently closed the journal. I kept my promise, Grandpa. A single honeybee landed gently on the worn cover of Samuel's journal. It rested there for only a moment before lifting into the evening sky and flying back toward the nearest hive. Noah smiled through his tears. Somehow, it felt like a thank you. Daniel placed a hand on his son's shoulder. No. Noah looked at him. You did something even greater. What? You reminded an entire community that broken things can live again. The last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the hills as the bees settled quietly into their hives. Noah watched the final swarm disappear inside the wooden boxes they had built with their own hands. He smiled. They came back. Daniel never looked away from the valley. A smile slowly spread across his face. No. Noah turned toward him. Daniel looked across the hills that everyone had once called dead. They came home. Father and son sat together in comfortable silence, listening to the gentle hum echo across the valley, the very sound that had terrified them on the day the bees fled, but now reminded them that life had returned. Sometimes the greatest miracle isn't bringing a valley back to life. Sometimes the greatest miracle is reminding people that hope always knows the way home.